Hi, this is Lou Ann Worley with Rock and Book Reviews, and I'm here today with Ali Malin. Hold on, I can do it. Malinenko.
You got it.
Okay. Um, Ali, you were raised in Brooklyn, correct?
No, I live in Brooklyn now, but I actually grew up in the Hudson Valley in a town called Monroe. It's about an hour north of New York City.
Oh, well, tell us about it.
Sure. So Monroe and the Hudson Valley in general is idyllic and beautiful. I had a really not carefree, but a very unsupervised childhood. It was the 80s, in the summer, my parents would be like, okay, go outside and play with your friends. And then when it was dinner time, they would open the back door and yell for me and my siblings, and we come running home. There were a lot of woods. I spent a lot of time exploring the woods. I put a lot of that in my book, Ghost Girl. So Z and her best friend Elijah are very much based on me and my best friend Dan, who lived around the corner. And we would go exploring in the woods, and we would make up stories and draw on the eyes on the knots of the trees. And I put all of that in the book. And the town of Knobbs Ferry is very much like what it was like to grow up in Monroe, although the cemetery in Knobbs Ferry, we did not have a cemetery that big in Monroe. I also included, because I am a librarian, so I also included the library in Newburgh, which I refer to as the big library, that my mother would take me to. It had 3 floors, and when I went there, it would completely blow my mind. But it was a great childhood. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I had a lot of creative freedom. Yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm very nostalgic about it.
Well, you should be. Sounds like the ideal childhood. Okay, so you stated that, quote, you have a burning desire to go to Antarctica, unquote. Why?
So this obsession that I have with going to Antarctica stems from a strange place. It actually starts with Peter Pan, which is kind of a leap from Peter Pan to a giant ice floe. Well, continent, excuse me.
I was going to say, where did you get Peter Pan and Antarctica?
Yeah, right. So when I was in library school, I loved Peter Pan growing up, first and foremost. I love that book. I love that story. I love the Disney movie, the whole thing. And when I was in library school, we did a comparative children's literature class where we looked at modern day books versus classic, and we would talk about it. So I wound up doing a reread when I was older, and it was, my memory of it and the actual text were very different. And that probably stems from watching the Disney movie. But I became really interested in J.M. Barrie's life and the author of Peter Pan. And it turns out that J.M. Barrie had a very close relationship with Robert Falcon Scott, who was an explorer. And from there, I learned about Scott's doomed trip to Antarctica. And that is why I want to go there, because it's a really fascinating story. And shortly after that, the American Museum of Natural History in Manhattan did a whole exhibit on Robert Falcon Scott's entire expedition, and they had the huts and they had the sledges, and I just became more and more interested, and I've wound up reading every book I can find on both northern and polar exploration because it fascinates me.
And I am surprised because as much as I pride myself on being a history buff, I've not heard of him.
Well, I mean, he didn't fare so well, so.
Apparently. But, so is that what makes him so special to you?
So I feel like his story is just really unique. It's full of that British, we will cover every continent, we will, dominate the cultures, and we will be the explorers. We are the plucky ones. We are the ones who can get it done. And he set up his expedition as a scientific expedition, which was not common. And he took his men down, and they sailed down to Antarctica, and they spent a lot of time before they even started their journey doing scientific experiments and studying the ice and exploring the area that they landed in. And it was very we are doing this thing for science. And then Roald Amundsen, who was a Norwegian, showed up, and he was like, yeah, I'm just going to go to the pole. I don't care about science. And Scott found that deplorable. And he was like, well, that's awful. This is, you have to be better than that. And Amundsen was like, no, it's good. And he hitched up his sleigh dogs and he took off. And Scott, for one of his many faults, wound up bringing ponies who definitely didn't fare well on the Antarctic ice. They were Norwegian ponies. So he was like, ice is ice, but it's really not the same climate and it's not the same culture. And the ponies, they didn't make it. So he wound up stranded, and Edmondson got all the way to the pole. And, I don't want to upset anyone, but he did so by also consuming the dogs that he had running the sledge. So, Scott and much of England found that also to be terrible. But he made it to the South Pole and he made it back safely and he went on other expeditions, and Scott and his men, they got to the South Pole, but they got there second and then they didn't make it off the ice. And they're technically still frozen out there now, which is kind of wild.
That's sad. I'll have to look into that.
I mean, it's a very tragic story. And like Scott, he has so much confidence and like so much belief in what he was doing. And he just did so many things so wrong. And it's just, I just find him fascinating.
Yeah, I always had tied the Norwegian to the one who explored the South Pole, but apparently I was wrong there.
No, he got to the South Pole. Edmondson was the one.
He wasn't the one. So anyway, when did you begin writing stories and poetry?
So I wrote my first story when I was 8 years old. It was a story that involved a fatal car accident, because I was very dark as a child, apparently. I was already into the spooky stuff. And
what inspired this?
I just made it up. I wanted it to be like I thought it was going to be very serious. It was going to be kids' story. It was going to be very serious. It was exactly 8 pages long. And I took it to my parents and I was like, listen, I wrote a novel. And they were like, we're so proud of you, sweetie, but 8 pages isn't a novel, but we're so proud of you. And they continue to be very encouraging in my writing to this day. And then with poetry, I kind of got into poetry as a teenager, writing kind of angsty, goth poetry stuff. And then when I got to college, I started taking it a little more seriously. I majored in writing. And prior to working on my first novel, well, I published in total 4 or 5, I can't remember, poetry book. It's like 4 poetry and 2 chapbooks. That's what it is. Over the course of my writing career, but I was working on that much longer. Like I didn't start working on a novel until I think I was like 30. So my 20s was all about.
You don't look much older than that now.
You're very sweet, but I am.
Oh, great. You look good.
Thank you.
So, and then you also stated you write in a closet every morning before dawn. What closet and why?
So, welcome to Brooklyn life. So I recently have moved. So I've upgraded. I have like an actual writing room, which is great. It has a window. After 14 years of writing in a closet, the fact that I can look out a window in the early morning is, it's amazing. But prior to, I had a small 1-bedroom apartment, and that my husband and I live in, and there wasn't really room for, like, he's also a writer. So there wasn't room for like another computer in the living room, but there was a large walk-in closet that the previous tenant had built bookshelves into. And it was like a little cozy little nook. And when the real estate guy opened the door and I took one look at it and I was like, this is where I want to write. And my husband was like, I think we're going to get the apartment. So I did, and it was amazing, and I did it for many years. But again, I'm very happy to have upgraded to a whole entire room
and a real window.
And a real window. These are like this is a big deal in Brooklyn.
So why before dawn?
Because I have a full-time job, so I work as a librarian and an archivist, and the before dawn thing, because I'm going to preface this by saying I'm absolutely not a morning person. This has been, I've been doing this now for over a decade and it's still a struggle. But my husband is a morning person. And so what happened is I would start to, like, he would get up early and start writing. And I'd be like, well, I'll write when I get home from work because I don't want, I'll stay up late and write. But the problem with that is that sometimes you have really bad days, or sometimes you're just tired. And then you get home and you're like, nah, I'm just going to watch some TV,
Yeah.
or I'm just going to read a book. I don't really feel like making something out of nothing.
Brain dead.
Yeah. So I noticed
Yeah.
that he was being really productive and getting a lot of stuff done at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a try. And I did. And I have to tell you, it is not easy and it's not for everyone, but you can get a lot of work done before the day touches you at all. Like before you have like the bad commute, or before like you have a crappy meeting at your job. If you get up first thing in the morning, or if you're a night person and like late night works better for you, but if you find that time that you're like, you can train your brain to be like, okay, nothing else matters. The only thing that matters is right now we're writing, and that's all we're doing. And it works. It's worked for me. I know a lot of other people who do it too. We have a whole like Twitter hashtag, the 5 a.m. Writers Club, where like we'll get on and be like, okay, it's 5 a.m. time to do this. Like to make a donut commercial.
So is your husband a writer too then?
He is, yes, yes. I mean, we're very different writers. He doesn't write for children. He writes adult novels, and he writes a lot more poetry than I do. But yeah, so he's also still getting up. He's in the other room now.
Well, I can understand that. I'm not a morning person either,
Yeah.
but I know a lot of times when I've been pressed with something and need to come up with an idea, a lot of times I'll wake up 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and it'll be there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'll
it's
get up and
weird.
write down. So I always keep a pad by my bed with a
Oh, that is
pen.
the best advice, because I can't tell you how many times I've woken up with like a plot fix.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'll remember in the morning. And I never remember in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, no, I had it. It was right here. And it's gone.
That's why I have the
I
pad.
keep that paper.
So anyway, tell us about your newly released book of Ghost Girl.
Sure. So this is Ghost Girl. This is my debut baby. It's a middle grade book, so it's like 8 to 12-year-olds. And it is the story of Z, her best friend Elijah, and her bully turned buddy Nellie. And what happens is one day they live in a small town, like I said, based very much on the town I grew up in. A big storm comes to town, and it turns out afterwards they discover there's some people missing. And then along with the people that are missing, a brand new principal shows up, and his name is Principal Scratch, and he engages with the town in such a way that they all sort of become wrapped by him. Like he makes all their wishes come true. He helps them focus, and everyone absolutely loves him. And it's just Z and her friends who are like, what's going on here? Because all of a sudden, all their family members start to act really weird. And the whole town is acting really weird, and they have to figure out what happened. It involves obviously some ghosts. She's called Ghost Girl because Z has the ability to see ghosts. It involves some very creepy dogs, some not so nice, again, a not so nice principal. And it's basically the story of Z discovering who she is with this new ability, and helping her and her friends helping figure out how to help their families who are in danger. And then on top of that, it deals with some bigger issues. You know, there's some talk about mental health. There's some talk about poverty. You know, none of it's like, it's not like like an issues book at all, but I wanted to build into the story some families that maybe you don't usually see. Like for instance, Z is raised by her big sister. And I just wanted to talk about things like that, you know, stuff that you don't, that experiences kids have, you know, dealing with grief and parents that might have mental health struggles. So I wanted to include those things so that they saw themselves represented in this book. But it's still very much like a Bengu story.
That's much needed in this day and age.
Yeah, that's what I hope. I hope so.
Sounds exciting. Okay, and you also have great news about upcoming novel. Tell us about it.
I sold my second book to the same editor, to Catherine Teigen Press, and that book is called This Appearing House, and it is going to be out next August. And I'm super excited. That is, it's not a continuation of Z's story. They're both standalones. It's a standalone story. It's kind of, I pitched it in terms of it's a kind of similar to the book A Monster Calls. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. So A Monster Calls is a story about a kid dealing with his mother's illness. So it's the story of a girl and her best friend who wind up getting trapped in a haunted house. It's another spooky book. But that house turns out to be a lot more than what she had anticipated. And it's a book about illness and trauma and how we learn to move on from some of the hardest things that we've had to go through in our lives. And it's very much based on some experiences that I've had. And I think I'm very excited for it to be in the world. I'm also very scared for it to be in the world because it is very personal. But like, much like the way I talked about bigger issues in Ghost Girl, this one takes it to another like extra level, bigger issue kind of stuff.
So is it still written for the middle grade?
It is still a middle grade book. Yes. It just deals with some bigger topics about like how you manage after you go through traumatic experiences. And yeah, so I'm super excited about it though. So I hope
I am so glad that they are standalone.
Yeah, me too. I love a standalone.
As much as series can be exciting, there are so many out there now.
There are, and yeah.
As a reader, I read so many books, and then all of a sudden I'll wait for a year, 2 years, or so many months, and then I have to go over because I've read so many books and I'm not sure if I remember the plot. So.
Yeah, I mean, I love serial. I do. Like, I've read so many great ones. Like Catherine Arden's Small Spaces, and then she came out with Dark Waters, and there's another one that I'm blanking on the title of. They all live in the same universe, so it's not really serial, but it's the same characters, and I love that. And when people do it and they do it well, that's fantastic. But I think it's maybe because growing up when I was reading middle grade books, serials weren't as common.
Right.
I love a good standalone. Like, tell me a story, start to finish.
Drew or something.
Unless you, yes.
Yeah.
But like, I love a good standalone. Like, tell me a story, start to finish.
Yes.
And
there's not enough.
Yeah. And kids have been like, you're going to write another book with Z? And I was like, no, probably not. Like, I mean, there's a huge desire. If I have to have a good story to tell. Right. Like, I feel good with the story that I told. So I'm ready to like tell some more stories.
I'm glad you're brave enough to face issues. I found that I've had a lot of issues that, I don't know, I've mentioned before that on my blog that I used to get hooked on soap operas. And there was 3 soap operas I'd watch every day, and I just didn't want to be away during that time of day and miss them. But then after a few months, I thought, this is ridiculous. Nobody's life can be that messed up that much for that long, and that many times. And so I just totally, so I never watched anymore. And then when my kids got to be teenagers and they started watching, I said, it's a waste of time. It is such a negative thing, and nobody has that many problems that much. And do you know, it came back and bit me. When my kids started marrying, all of a sudden I'm finding myself living a life of a soap opera. And so I have been sharing some of my issues in my blog, and it has only strengthened me because other people have come out, and then they share theirs. And I think it makes such a good support system.
Yes. I think the thing about storytelling, be it a soap opera or a book, storytelling is just a means to say, this is something that I've experienced. This is something that I feel. Does anyone out there know what I'm talking about? And then someone out there is like, yes, I know that. And then your empathy web that connects you to other people gets a little bit bigger. Yeah. Like, storytelling is at its core just empathy. You follow a character and you go through their experience and you're with them and you feel what they feel and you struggle with them and you celebrate with them. And it's a really important aspect of what it is to literally be a human. It helps you understand other people in your life. Stories are the playbooks. And I talk a lot about, because like people are like, oh, I wouldn't let my kid read a scary story. I wouldn't. And I get it. But also, scary stories have the biggest empathy, because when your character is in a dangerous situation, you root for them even more. And scary stories also allow for kids, especially, like, kids know the world is scary. They're not dumb. Like, we can lie to them all we want and say the dog went to the farm, but like, yeah, they
Yeah.
know what happened. You know, they're here, they're watching. The climate change is a thing. Like they're experiencing all of this in real time. And scary stories let them navigate their fear and their comfort level. And it's like you get to play act how you defeat the monsters so that when the monster shows up in your real life, as monsters always do at some point, you know how to handle it. And like, it's the same experience that you had watching soap operas and like talking about the things that you've struggled with. Like, it's part of like why when I wrote Disappearing House, and I'll just to give it like context, I was diagnosed with cancer, and Disappearing House is very much about the trauma of a significant illness and how, when it's finished, how you move past it, like how you're going to be able to move on. And you know, I wrote this book, and I was like, okay, this was just for me. I'm going to put it in the trunk. I'm not going to share it with anyone. I got my feelings out. I said all the things I needed to say. That's all it was. And I gave it to my friend Amber, and she read it and she was like, no, you need to give this to, we share an agent. She's like, you need to give this to our agent. You need to, she's like, this book, like she's a teacher also. She's like, kids need a book like this. They need to see someone talk about things that they've been through that is scary. And I gave it to my agent, and she felt the same way, and my editor felt the same way. And like I said, I'm super excited for it to exist, but also like this is like, I feel like I'm putting my journal out there in a way. Like it's a story, but it's like emotionally me at my rawest. But at the same
So
time,
when is this coming out? When is
this
it
is
going?
next August.
August?
Yeah, so it'll be out August
Maybe we can
2022.
get on it together, because I would like, I noticed the thing about your cancer, and I would like to approach that too at another time. So maybe
Sure.
when your book comes out,
That's
we can do
perfect.
this again.
I would
And
love to.
that
I would
way
love
we
to.
can also address the cancer issue I'd like
Yeah.
to learn more
Mhm.
about.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your next big project?
So I just finished another middle grade book. This one is about witches. It's like a witch origin story. So less the witch as the antagonist and more the witches as the protagonist. I was talking to my husband about it when I described it to him. He was like, "So it's like Little Women, but with witches." And I was like, "Yeah, that feels right." It's very much about
Now that
sisterhood.
would be interesting.
It's very much about sisterhood, because I have two sisters in my family and I are very close. And I just finished that up, and I'm very excited about it. I just gave it to my beta readers. So those are my trusted, you know, they read all of my stuff before my agent sees it, and I'll base on their feedback, and then I'm gonna send it to my agent, and then hopefully if she feels like there's something working there, we'll work on some revisions, and then we'll send it to my editor and we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed I'll have another book in the
Sounds
world. And
good.
yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, now
Keeping it
tell us
sweet,
about
baby.
a giveaway you're gonna offering.
So yeah, so we're doing a giveaway. So I believe we're doing a copy for US Canada. Okay, so I'm super excited about that. I love doing giveaways. Go through your site
Yeah,
to
my
apply for it. Yes,
rockinbookreviews.com. The raffle copter
take
will
it
be
away.
there.
Yes, the raffle copter's there. So I'm very excited about that. So one more opportunity for someone to get their hands on my debut.
Sounds exciting. It really
Yeah.
does. Is there any final comments you'd like to make before we close off?
No, I just want to thank you. This was such a fun conversation.
Yeah. Oh, you're a
And
delight to talk with.
oh, thank you. And I really, I'm just really excited. I appreciate all the support. You know, bloggers like you have been, and podcasters have just been absolutely amazing in helping me. Cause you know, it's hard, you know, you have your one book, and my publicist and my press are amazing and I love them. But I also know that the week after my book came out, they had other books they had to promote. So it's like, I feel like people like you are just like the lifeblood of like the book promotion business. And I'm just so thankful for what you do and for letting me come on.
Well, I'm delighted. And I like to every once in a while put a plug in. Before I started reviewing, I never realized the importance of reviews to authors. And so I'd never reviewed a book until about 1.5 years before I started my blog. And so I'll just put a plug in that everybody put in your review. Okay, so
Yeah, it does. It makes a huge difference. It really, like, in just the way the algorithm is on book buying sites. If like Amazon has this magical number of, like, if you once you hit 50 reviews, you start getting put into the recommended, like, people who bought this also bought this. And it really makes a difference. So even if it's just like one line, like, anything
and
helps.
that's what I just found out too,
Yeah.
just a couple of months ago. I wasn't aware that Amazon did that. So,
Yeah, they do.
so again, if you like the book, especially, post a review of some sort.
Yes, please
Okay.
do.
And we urge all of you to search the universe through books, and we'll
Yes.
say goodbye.
Okay.